Homecoming. With the Downer Brothers. Move it.
You want a bunch of real estate in the city, what you gon' do? Call the Downer Brothers and I guarantee they got you. Real estate business, listen, let's get it.
Real estate.
Real estate business, listen, let's get it.
Listen.
This episode is sponsored by Jared Greer with Guaranteed Rate. Whether you are looking to buy your first home or renovate your current home, go to rate.com/Jared Greer today.
Equal housing lender, subject to credit approval. Restrictions apply. NMLS ID 301746. NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
This is Homecoming with the Downer Brothers. My name is Anthony.
My name's Anton.
And who do we have today?
We have Sherman DILLA Thomas. He's a Chicago historian, and let me tell you, he told us so much about ourselves. I was like, man, he might be a member of our family.
So welcome to Homecoming with the Downer Brothers, man. We appreciate you coming out.
It's definitely an honor. You know, Chicago's favorite firefighter, so I'm certainly honored to be here with you guys. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I started watching like all these videos that you've been creating, and I was just fascinated because, like, you know, there was different neighborhoods that you came up with and told the name of this, why they named the street that, and why they have a school named this way, and so on and so forth. And I was like, why? Like, why did I not know any of this? You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, please keep doing it because it's good for the city, it's good for the culture, man.
Word, I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate what you guys are doing too. I'm certainly a huge fan. I want to make sure I say that off back. I think people misunderstand what history means as far as like being a history buff or the importance of history. It's not some rigid structured thing. It's basically the origin of stuff. So I've all my whole life just been really into the origin of things.
Yeah. I feel you though. Like we went to U of I in Champaign, and we have degrees in history because I've always felt most comfortable writing about what I liked about history.
Yeah, or what I learned about history.
Right.
And I think that's the most important thing, that we learn from it so we can make better decisions moving forward.
That's it. It's a roadmap for real when you allow it to be. Of what to do and what not to do, that's for sure. You guys, so U of I, did you guys by chance play with Brandon Moore? Or know Brandon Moore? I think he left out of U of I maybe like 02, 03.
But we're probably on campus together, but
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, wait a minute. Before we get too far, man, this is Homecoming with the Downer Brothers. You have to tell us where is home, where you from.
The beautiful thing about me is home is where I am right now. So I'm from Chicago, neighborhood called Auburn Gresham on the south side. It's near St. Savannah. You know, Kanye West famously said, the school Calumet down the street from the Stones, right? So
Right.
I went to that high school. I'm from Auburn Gresham. Grew up on 81st and Troop. I went to John W. Cook School, which is on Bishop Street, right on 81st Street. Then I went to Calumet. Unfortunately, I went to high school, though, in the zero tolerance days where whatever you did, you got put out after the age of 16, right? It was even a purpose of that. After 16, they don't get the same money for you anymore. So when you're a freshman and a sophomore, you worth more, so they don't put you out as fast. After 16 or 17, it's something about the way the law is written that you're not worth as much. So anyway, I got into a little trouble at Calumet when I was 16. I got put out. Went to Olive Harvey Middle College, which was an alternative high school, which I credit with saving my life. Not only because, you know, it's Chicago, right? You're going to be some sort of affiliated or hang around or something if you're going to survive it, right? So I'm not claiming to be any kind of super thug or anything, but Olive Harvey kind of steered me and taught me how to study, taught me the importance of study, taught me to, you know, they called us scholars. Like, that's what the teachers and principals called everybody. Like, you were a scholar. So Olive Harvey Middle College really changed me. I left there, got a GED, went to Eastern Illinois University where I majored in English and African American Studies.
Right down the street from U of I.
Right. Yeah, for sure. You know, I used to go up there for the Cotton Club.
All right.
Yep, hang out for sure. Fraternity House was on Daniel Street and on back in the day. Yeah. So I pledged Omega Psi Phi at Eastern Illinois University, taught there the chapter. Came home, worked for Verizon Wireless for a little while. I thought I was going to teach. Did the student teacher practicum thing at junior high school, and I heard some teenage girls say some things to each other, and right there in that moment I understood, like, yeah, this probably isn't gonna work for me. I don't have the temperament to listen to teenage girls talk about their sex lives. Like, oh my God, like, yeah, no, this ain't gonna work. Luckily, thankfully, my line brother was a supervisor at ComEd, and he said, hey, you want to be a temporary meter reader? Paid at the time, I think maybe $18.50 an hour, but it was 6 to 2, weekends off, and he explained to me that the trades allowed you to scale up. But 6 to 2, weekends off, it was better than what I was doing, and so I went and did that. Been in ComEd ever since for 10 years. Presently, I'm an area operator, which is a fancy way of saying I'm a lineman downtown. We troubleshoot the electrical problems. We work on the high voltage. We, any new building that's constructed downtown, we do the inspections, make sure that they're getting the voltage that they need for the amperage that they're going to be pulling. When Sears Tower lost its power in May, I was a part of the team that got it restored. I think I got to say Willis Tower once, or we'll all get sued. But it's Sears Tower.
Yeah, right. If you're from Chicago.
If you're from the shot.
If you're from the shot,
it's Sears Tower.
It's certainly Sears Tower. So yeah, I'm a son of a cop. And
We are us too.
Right, okay, see word.
And I think I know your line brother. His name's Larry.
Yep, yes sir.
Larry, he went to Morgan Park.
Yes sir.
Yeah, we went to Morgan Park.
Yep.
Class 2000.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
So,
What up, Larry?
I'm sure you're gonna be mad. I don't give him a shout. There you go, get you a shout out. So that's me in a nutshell. And, as a son of a police officer, that comes with daily history lessons, right? The why these gangs are here, these neighborhood shifts, the demographic shifts. That just comes with being the son of a police officer. And I guess for me, those lessons, I never lost them. He also would give you tests. You want to drive his car somewhere, you needed to be able to, it's not only explain the neighborhood, but give him like the geographics, right? So you're going to the rink on 87th Street. 100 East is Cottage Grove. If you didn't have 800 East quick, real fast, you couldn't take his car. He's going to be on the bus.
Okay.
So that's how I learned the city and the history. And then it just expanded. Okay, well, why is it named Cottage Grove? I needed to know. And then it's just been like that ever since.
Oh, okay.
That explained because I was definitely about to ask you about that. Like how do you get to a place where you're interested in it's 77 neighborhoods in Chicago,
So I'm like 77. First of all, I didn't know the exact number of neighborhoods. So 77, I always wondered how many neighborhoods there were in the city of Chicago. I know there are certain neighborhoods that I've gone to, as being on the Chicago Fire Department. Right. I didn't even know those neighborhoods existed. And I'm like, man, these people probably never been to my side of the town. And it's almost like I felt like I was in another city when I was in all the way northwest, all the way to Saginaw or whatever it is.
That's in a whole different world. What it used to amaze me is how identical the worlds look, though. So minus the architecture. I'll say minus some of the other stuff that goes on our side of the city. But if you're driving on the north side or south side, the bungalow belts look like the bungalow belts. You think you're in the same neighborhood. And to your point, that's probably one of my favorite things about Chicago is if you want Puerto Rican food, you can go to Humboldt Park. And it feels like Puerto Rican. They have a neighborhood called Pascal Boricua. That's between the two Puerto Rican flags that are on Division Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
That strip is the only officially designated Puerto Rican neighborhood in the country. So even New York, that has a Puerto Rican population, right, a real big one, they don't have an officially designated by the city neighborhood like Chicago has over there in Humboldt Park. So the same thing as far as like our Chinatowns. You can go, like you say, to there's places where we have Orthodox Jews up on Devon Avenue. Yeah. I didn't see that as a kid. People with yarmulkes on and the curly things.
Right. And the black suits that they wear.
Let me do my locks like this. That's kind of cool, right? So I love that you mentioned that for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that it's beautiful to see the cultures. And so there's pros and cons to it, I guess. Like, right, we're talking about 77 neighborhoods. We also noticed that you have this concentration of one ethnicity in these neighborhoods. And it's great because, you can travel there and experience that culture, that food, the music that they like, so on and so forth. But there's also like a negative historical connotation to it. There's a reason why we have such segregation in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's behind that?
Well, a number of things, but primarily what started it for Chicago is these things called racial covenants. And actually it goes a little bit further back than that. So quick history lesson for you guys, right? Before the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, everybody lived downtown, right? That was the Chicago borders. The furthest, once we got incorporated as a city, I think the furthest boundary was Pershing, which was 39th Street then. The North Avenue was the northern boundary. That's why it's called North Avenue,
Okay.
right? Lake Michigan, of course, would be our eastern boundary. And then the western boundary started to move, and it didn't run a straight line based on town. Cicero used to be this real big town. You know, West Chicago used to be this real big town. We started taking chunks and chunks away. You know, that's why Western Avenue has its name. At one point, it was the western boundary between Chicago and other
Cicero?
places, right? You know, whatever place west, with
Right.
primarily like Cicero, stuff like that. But then after the Great Chicago Fire, people moved away from the city center because, hey, we don't want to be congested like that. Another fire come through and wipe everything out again. Let me spread away from people. That's why we also have a lot of masonry, right, stone construction because of the fire code. Right. But I'm getting to the point. We had, especially a guy named John Jones and a lot of premier African Americans. We had on Dearborn Street, right? They got Plymouth Court, where Dearborn Station is, the property where Jones Commercial is. That was all the black neighborhood, and more to a point. Like 2-3 African Americans owned it, like they owned the land. He donated the land to create Jones Commercial. And the school ain't even named after him. Ain't that crazy?
Yeah. Wait, what was his name again?
His name is John Jones.
John Jones. But it's not. But it's named after a different Jones.
It's named after William Jones, who was the first head of the Chicago Board of Education. Right.
So he gets lost in history.
So he gets lost in history. No, we bringing him right now.
Yeah,
so
we bringing him back right now.
Back now, right?
Interesting tidbit about, because you brought that particular section of town, the first African American firefighters fought out of Engine 21 in that neighborhood.
I love that story. And not only did they fight there, but they created what every fireman is using right now today, the fire pole.
That's right.
The way I like to tell the story is the brother was so... You know, we use hay, right? The horses, that's how we got to fire. There wasn't cars and all that. So they stored the hay on the 3rd floor, and they held it up with a metal brass pole to hold the hay up. So this was an all black, like he said, Engine 21 fire engine company.
Right.
Brother was up there sleeping on that hay, hiding out because he was trying to dodge the rest of the work with everybody else. Then the fire bell rang, and he, you know, the last person, we're fraternal in nature as African Americans, right? So the last person down to get on this horse wagon, we're going to talk about your black butt all the way to the fire. So
It's true. It's so true. Yeah.
He knocked the pole down that was used to hold the hay, dropped it down the pole hole, and slid down it to not have to hit his boss's crap. And that moment in time invented the fire pole for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, man.
And that's an actual documented true story.
Documented true story. I might have fudged he was taking a nap. He might have known doing something.
No, I believe all of that.
That's
but it's incredible history because, again, it started at Engine 21, an all-black fire company for the city of Chicago, and then spread to every firehouse in the nation. You know, so and we had well, the reason why we had those fire poles you already mentioned is because we had horse and carriages up until 1923. And I always remember 1923 because I think of Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
So 23, that's when we went to motorized actual fire engines and trucks.
Awesome.
In 1923.
Watch everybody in Chicago listen to this and then be like, I'm gonna always remember that 1923.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan.
And firefighters literally fought it. They sabotaged the motorized engines and trucks because they love their horses so much. I mean, horses, much like we have a relationship with dogs, people love their horses, and they were sabotaging it, but they had a mandate in 1923. Enough was enough.
Absolutely. So moving past that, Chicago Fire spreads out the city.
Okay.
And they start to create, Hyde Park was his own town. They were one of the first to do it, create what we call racial covenants. Excuse me. And that meant that if you didn't belong to a certain race, you couldn't live in the neighborhood, and realtors couldn't rent property to you. And they took it to court very early, but the judges were of that mindset as well. So early on it passed, and that was the law.
Right.
And so...
And that's nationwide.
And that was nationwide, but particularly strong here in Chicago. So as the neighborhoods formed, we started to get the elevated train rides, right? Then we started to get streetcars. And as the streetcars expanded, people moved, right? You didn't have to live next to people. We kept moving. But, you know, in the case of Hyde Park, right, a guy named Paul Cornell, that's the founder of Hyde Park, bought up a ton of land. I mean, just a ton of land. He set up the streets. He lined them up. He platted the land. He did all of that. So then now he's able to say, in order to buy land on this property, in order to build on this property, you have to follow this racial covenant. And not only that, you have to sign that when you die, it gets passed down to your kids, and they won't ever sell to an African American or anyone who didn't fall into whatever that particular racial covenant was.
Right.
And so that trajectory set up our neighborhoods,
And that's why Chicago has been so segregated.
So segregated, innately it's built in, and so we go from racial covenants until FDR does the New Deal, and we get GI bills, and then we get the federally backed mortgages, and home ownership becomes this thing for African Americans. But African Americans were locked into a particular neighborhood due to racial covenants, and then they decided to paint that neighborhood that they were locked into red. And so we're not going to loan anybody that lives in these particular neighborhood tracts anything. So what never gets talked about that is you couldn't even rebuild, right? So the oldest structures, black folks always get the oldest structures. So the Black Belt was the oldest part of the city, anyway. That's where the first rich people moved. They built the mansions. They left, went to the Gold Coast. People bought those mansions for cheap, and instead of it being one mansion, they turned it into 20 apartments. That's why you hear the stories about, I lived on the 3rd floor and we had to share a bathroom with 4 families. It ain't because that's how they built the building. Right. It was originally a single family home that had 1 bathroom per floor. Right. And they diced it up that way, right?
Right.
So, but just imagine you couldn't get a loan to even rebuild it. To even say, hey, this is too much, this is raggedy. It's 20 families living in something that was designed for 1 family. How fast do you think it gets run down, right? Right. And how you just imagine a water flow, right? They keep extending the water pipes and everything else, giving these kitchenettes and pipes everywhere. It was dangerous. That was the number one cause of death for many African American families, those kitchenette fires, because if 20 families are boxed into this place, there's only still 2 doors. Right. So if your unit caught on fire, you couldn't even get out. You had to hope your neighbor was home to open his door so you could keep, to even get out the building. It was absolutely insane. So, but that's what set us in the trajectory that locked us into the neighborhood paths. Until my favorite Chicagoan, Earl B. Dickerson, won the first case that started to break the back legally. His Supreme Court win started to provide the precedent that others were able to use to eventually prove that it was unconstitutional.
So basically, a black Chicagoan named Dickerson, goes to the Supreme Court in D.C., wins, right? And then from that point, that set precedent for the entire nation to give banks at the time that were lending for home loans a leg to stand on when they say, you know what, we want to make money by extending loans to African Americans.
Right, to whoever has money.
You know what year it was?
So his first initial win was about 1942. The main case that broke the back was in 1949. So that's why if you're from Chicago, you always hear people say that their family was the first, second, or third African American family somewhere in the early 1950s.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's how our grandparents.
So right now, this is the moment where you're gonna see a video that Dilla made for us about our family moving to 91st and South Parkway, now 91st and King Drive. So we'll take a look at that right now.
Yo, what's up? It's your favorite neighborhood historian, Dilla, and I was talking to Chicago's favorite firefighters and home renovators when they asked me a pretty serious question. Anton and Anthony wanted to know why their grandfather, who was drafted into World War II and served honorably on the SS Mount Baker, why he was forced to live in the area that we affectionately call Bronzeville. Grandpa Downing followed Mrs. Downing to Chicago, marrying her in their living room. Well, Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, and in the 1940s, most of those neighborhoods had what we call restrictive racial covenants. You may need to pause to read. Those racial covenants legally decided who was allowed to live in what communities. The Downings, like thousands of other African Americans, arrived to Chicago via the Great Migration. African American neighborhoods would remain overcrowded until this gentleman, Earl B. Dickerson, took the Woodlawn Association to the Supreme Court. He was successful in setting the precedent that will overturn racial covenant. That's how the Downing family went from the low end to near Tooley Park.
All right, so look, that video was dope.
It really was.
That video was amazing. Like, you showed us documentation and a picture of our grandfather that I guess after MLK was assassinated. I didn't even know that he spoke out about that in the newspaper.
Like openly?
Yeah.
In 1968? I was like...
Think about that. In the job that he had, some boss came by. He wasn't going to be working for the post office very long. That took a lot of
courage.
Bravery. So our grandfather, he worked. So number one, let's go back to what you put in the video in the beginning.
Okay, for sure.
He signed up at 18 years old to join the Navy during World War II, 6 months after Pearl Harbor.
Right.
He's 18 years old, and I looked at it. It was his handwriting because I know his handwriting.
Yeah.
And I looked on the thing, and it said 18 years old, and that he worked at Capitol Bowling
Bowling
Alley. The thing that he taught us how to bowl. That was the thing that our grandfather did.
Wow.
He took us bowling all the time.
In the
That
summer,
is
we would go
so cool.
every I want to say every Tuesday, all summer long.
Yeah, so it gave us a different perspective. Like, man, so he started bowling when he was a teenager, worked there before he went off to war. Now, he served in the Navy for 4 years. He left the Navy in 1946, and he was writing letters to our grandmother.
Correct, y'all. He left the Navy. Well, so they let him come home in 46. His discharge papers in 1947, I'm sure.
Oh,
He
okay.
didn't want you guys to give him his extra month in his
Yeah, okay.
All
right, so 47.
I was climbing
I'm
through
with
the
that.
archives. We got to make sure we give the brother his respect.
Right. You know what? I think our grandmother used to always say 46 because that's when he finally met her physically here in Chicago.
Right.
So he's writing her letters through while he's in the Navy, and then finally comes to Chicago, and then they had to live in Bronzeville because of the racial covenants. And so, but to see all that documentation was just amazing, and I just have a newfound respect for what he did, because he served in the Navy when black men were still called boys.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Or when he
Right.
came home, he's in uniform, and he didn't get the same respect.
Absolutely.
But somehow, some way, he through all of that, he comes here, he gets married to our grandmother, Eleanor Downing, and then they get married, and then they actually saved up their money and eventually get a mortgage from we still haven't figured out what bank.
Yeah, working on that.
We're still working on that, but whatever bank extended them a loan gave a black couple a mortgage, gave them a home loan that allowed them to be the third black family to move on to 91st and what we now know as King Drive.
Right across the street from Thule Park, which we played at as kids and didn't know any of that history.
Yeah, and so I think we had this brand partnership with Guarantee Rate. And the reason why we're partnered with Guarantee Rate is so that we can increase access and awareness to home financing in black communities across the country, in Chicago and across the country.
Absolutely.
And knowing that our grandparents, they were extended an opportunity by some bank, gave them a loan at a time when it was not popular to extend home loans to black families. We're continuing that work because talking about a history lesson, we're the 4th generation of Downing men to own property.
Man.
Charlie Downing in Jackson, Mississippi, well, actually Raymond, Mississippi, he actually bought a house and owned 30 acres and had horses and farmed the land. And this is during the Great Depression.
I see.
Charlie Downing.
I've seen it's in the clip. That's the first part of the clip that has the census record.
Yeah.
Where the poor census guy couldn't spell Theodore, so he just called your grandpa Theo at age 6. Yeah. Do I got it? I think I can show it to you real quick while we sit here.
Oh, that's powerful, though. That you wouldn't even have the census record from that.
Yeah.
Look, man.
But no, wait, I want to finish this point, though.
Yeah.
Charlie Downing owns property down in Mississippi that we still own to this day, that our cousins now own and take care of. And that's the first place that I ever rode a horse, was on our own property, the Downing property in Mississippi.
Yeah, let's see.
Theodore's second generation
I was
homeowner.
going to say, how about Leon and Lula? So that Lula will be you guys.
That's our great grandmother.
Yeah. It's all right here. Your grandpa was 6 when they took this.
The census.
Theo.
Yeah.
And I'll send you guys this image. So
I was say, like, you don't know how you even got it.
Yeah,
Man, that's like
Mississippi.
that's man, that's
yes,
that's awesome, dude.
That's over here. It's going back up for you.
So while they're looking at that,
I see that.
we've
That's
got
crazy.
Charlie Downing, Theodore Downing, Anthony M. Downing, our father, and now here you have Anthony and Anton Downing, Downing brothers.
Right.
Property owners, 4 generations of property owners. It matters. It matters whether you know, whether you have history to look back on and say, hey,
Yes.
that is something that our family does. We own property. We witness our family be able to leverage that, have cash out refinance so that they can pay for college or for them to be able to buy a second home or to give a gift to help pay for a wedding or whatever it is. We saw that in our family, and too many families don't have that example. So then it comes up to, are you going to be the first generation in your family to be able to be that example of home ownership, of financial literacy, of knowing how to save, making sure that you have a life insurance policy, all of these things to provide the next generation a foundation to stand on. And they stand on our shoulders. You know, kids or grandkids that you may never meet.
That you will never meet. You owning a home cements you into history. You're going to pay taxes on that home. If there's an issue with inheritance later on, if it comes out later on down the line that you were the rightful owner of something, right, that inheritance can be passed down on a later date. But just in looking for your family, right, things happen. There's disconnections, right? People move away. People marry into new families. But someone 3 downing generations away will be able to go down to the Cook County's deeds of recorders and see the property that you own and see you guys' handwriting and see the steps that you guys got to do in order to be property owners. My favorite saying on earth is kids don't take after strangers. You'll be surprised at the Chicago greatness that occurs down family lines. That's typically how it happens. None of us are doing anything by ourselves, right? Someone gives you some kind of training. My favorite story is like Jason Weaver, right? Seeing how his mother was able to tell him, we don't need $2 million. You know, take the 100,000 and give us the points on the package, right? We'll take the residuals coming down the line. It's a reason why she had that thought process. She was in the jingle business. She was already in the business. She's her family sung the "I Want to Be Like Mike" jingle. They came up with the one of Flatter Friendly Skies.
Right.
She sung Knee High.
Really?
They sung background on every song on the Sparkle soundtrack with Aretha Franklin. This is Jason Weaver's mothers and aunties. You know
So
what
they
I'm saying?
knew how these contracts
They-
work
all
and how
that.
it was more money in the long-term residuals than to get a lump sum
had
check.
seen it, you know.
Right.
That's why I want to bring this up right here.
It's time for Anton's definition of the day.
The definition of the day is legacy. Legacy, by definition, is a gift by will, especially of money or other personal property. For example, she was left a legacy of $1 million. Or something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor, or from a past legacy of the ancient philosophers, like with books, or the legacy of war that has left pain and suffering. Even though in this example, coming after World War II, our grandfather and our grandmother left us a legacy of property. And I think that when we really look back and when you look at what's going on with your own family, you'll realize there's plenty of land that's probably in your name, whether it's in Arkansas, Mississippi, or Alabama. Just know that legacy is something that we're all responsible for giving to our next generation.
All right, so legacy is interesting because it does come in different forms. Legacy
shout
comes
out.
in.
My legacy, man, it's perfect that you say the certain forms, right? So African Americans historically were not allowed to join fraternal organizations at the colleges very early on, right? So we come out of slavery. Some of us, the talented tenth, as Du Bois calls us, right, is able to go to colleges. And we know that fraternities, just on the small end, kept the answers for tests, right? So that even helps you through college. But on the big end, that was networking for jobs and careers and professional advancement, right? African Americans were historically shut out of that. So they created their own fraternities that, unlike in a lot of colleges around the country, African Americans, right, ours is a lifelong bond, in and out of school. We take it very serious. It's a solemn oath. And so because you have people with that type of thought in mind, that legacy is important. But it's also, if you look at African Americans at every turn, you're gonna find somebody in some fraternity, right, who is at the forefront of this movement. And I'm so proud in my own family. I have a legacy of that. My son just became a member
That's
of
amazing.
Omega Psi Phi. And so I got two brothers that are members of Omega, and now my son is. So I'm glad that you're touching on legacy. Another small legacy, again, you're talking about home ownership and bank loans. Jesse Binga, the Binga Bank, right? He was a black banker in Chicago. He was one of the very few who was able to give out home loans in the time during before the Great Depression in the 1920s, right? But how did he get that money? Through a legacy. The first African American who we would kind of say as a street dude was a guy named Mushmouth Johnson, right?
Mushmouth?
Mushmouth Johnson.
All right.
You got to look at his picture. He's a hilarious cat. But Mushmouth Johnson ran brothels. Brothels were illegal in this place called the Levee District here in Chicago.
You know, I figured it was going to be something like that because people that have nicknames like that are definitely going to be some type of a gangster.
Yeah, so early.
That district was in the South Loop?
The district in the South Loop, what we commonly know now is like Cermak Street on Dearborn and Clark Street. It was lined. There was these other sisters. I don't want to cheat and use Google. Their names is coming to me. Another African American group of women that had the best brothel. They were madams. So
He said the best one.
oh, everybody went to it. They said, you know, I'm a historian. You'll be able to fact check me, and I'm gonna be correct. So Mushmouth Johnson ran 3 saloons. He also brought policy, a number of running to Chicago, right? Him and 3 other people were the first to bring it to the city. So he had a whole bunch of money.
For people that don't know, that's what ends up becoming the
lottery now. Don't get me started on that.
That's what policy is. Policy is lottery.
It's the lottery today, right? So he amassed his fortune, and you know, he lives a stressful life. So he passes away, you know, maybe 50, 60 years old, something like that. Again, I don't want to cheat. But with his money, his sister became the first African American to live on a dormitory at the University of Chicago, which has always allowed African Americans to be educated there, but they didn't let them stay on the dorm, right? So you could come and get an advanced degree, which is good, but you couldn't live on the dorm at the University of Chicago during that time. But she ended up marrying Jesse Binga, and with the money she inherited from Mushmouth Johnson, started the Binga Bank. Right, so his legacy went on to create
through his daughter into the
his sister who married
his sister,
Binga, and a lot of stuff came from the Binga Straight Bank. Oscar DePriest, who was our first African American to win an alderman here in Chicago. You got to have campaign money, right? Flyers cost, you know, those stickers that you see. You know, it's just like today, maybe at a lesser scale as far as the money go, but he was able to get the money from the Binga Street Bank, from the Binga State Bank is what it was called.
Right. You know, it's interesting that we bring this up because I just finished watching, not watching, but listening to this podcast called Bronzeville. Right. That's by Lawrence Fishburne and Lorenz Tate and a slew of other actors that we've heard of. Omari Hardwick is in it as well. And
shout out them.
They kind of changed the names a little bit, but it seems like
it's based on those.
I love the Tate brothers. I'm writing a book called 100 Dope Black Chicagoans You Should Know. I want to include them because not only just the Tate brothers, but their grandfather was a solid Chicago cat. They West Side cats. Everything in Bronzeville, the podcast. I won't say that. That ain't the correct thing to say. This is the correct thing to say. What we know commonly about Chicago policy and number running comes from a guy named Nate Thompson, who wrote the book called Policy about 25, 30 years ago. Some of the names have been changed. They're primarily talking about like the Jones boys, the 3 brothers.
Right. Oh, you know what you're saying it too.
Yeah, for sure. But that history is a real sad history. Ed Jones and his 3 brothers were black millionaires. You know what you've never seen in a Chicago history book ever? A picture of African Americans in line in a bread line during the Great Depression. You know why? Because the policy bankers didn't do that, right? Again, the neighborhood was redlined, so they couldn't get the loan to build, you know, colossal houses to house everybody, right? We had the slums, that's where we had to live. But they bought groceries and they paid bills and the lights stayed on and they, you know what I mean? Like if they didn't know you, if you were coming, you just arrived from Chicago via the Great Migration right on the train, and the number runners don't know this new guy from Mississippi, then you probably wasn't gonna be, you were gonna be a little hungry that week until we figured out was you gonna be a snitch or, you know, because the number running was
all about loyalty.
It was all about loyalty in the black community. And we know, right? We've seen what happened with Fred Hampton. We've seen what happened with the Panthers, that when you don't have loyalty, you get that outside infiltration and it brings down the whole thing, right? So that's what the number runners thought about. But to the point, because like I say, historians are long-winded. They amass this fortune via the number running. They opened the first African American. It was called the Benjamin Franklin nickel and dime store on 43rd Street. The Champ Joe Louis came to open it up for the African Americans and employed 3,000 people in Bronzeville.
Wow.
What?
So
one of the biggest period then.
yes, sir. So the government can't have that, but RICO wasn't a thing yet. So they go to Ed Jones and they say, hey, why does your mother have this mansion? She ain't paid no taxes. Why your brother got this Cadillac? They ain't paying no taxes. We locking up the whole family, your mama included. So Ed Jones says, well, I can't have that. I'll take the charge. I'm going to take the charge for my whole family. It's just a stand-up thing to do, so he does. Right. He gets sent to federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, where a guy named Sam Momo Giancana was serving time for prohibition.
That parallels the podcast.
Right. And so Sam Giancana makes Ed Jones thinks that he's his friend while they're in the jail. And the second so Ed Jones get out first and go. We had a guy named St. Louis Kelly who was the go-between between the Chicago mob and Bronzeville. And Kelly was smart enough to never give all the number running secrets. You know, the mob wanted they cut. He said, hey man, you know, they only made $100,000 over there in Bronzeville. You know, black folks ain't got no money. When really they was making $1 million. Right. So he was taking the mob, Al Capone and them, they cut. And St. Louis Kelly got killed in some bull crap beef in the hood with somebody else. And that opened the floodgates. They didn't have that go-between anymore. And when Ed Jones got released, Sam Giancana kidnapped him, said, you know, thanks for teaching me the game. You and your family leave. I want every number running policy you got. Everybody you work for now works for me. But what doesn't always get told is that money built Las Vegas. They had so much money that you got to wash it. So we think about the skim when they go to Vegas and they take the money out. It was also taking all them black nickels and dimes and quarters that people was paying for policy and putting it in the slot machines. That's what's paying out the slot machines. That's how they was washing the money. You still need, the unions gave money to build the Vegas, but you still even need the 20% down on that, right? The union going to do however many million to build the construction. You still need the 10%, 20%. That 20% came out of Bronzeville in Chicago.
Man, there is so much, and it's only so much we can get in this episode. But that is just, it's amazing. Dude, you gotta write a book. You gotta write a book and get it all in there, and then then we'll produce the movie.
I'll write the forward.
Y'all too, because you guys have the Chicago. We don't have a Chicago movie, man. They got Menace to Society. They got Boys in the Hood. They got Hoodlum. It was filmed here. That's about New York, you know. Even Casino and Godfather, all those are New York stories. There is a Chicago story.
We gotta write about Bronzeville during the 20s and 30s.
Yes, sir. You can run it all the way down, man, for real, to now.
All right, so we're gonna definitely work on that. In fact, it's so much that we can talk about. We're gonna have you come back for another episode. I'm serious.
I really do.
I'm serious. But let's make a transition right now. I want to ask you, when you hear the word homecoming, what does that mean to you?
Oh man, for me, it means a number of things. It means somebody arriving home, right? I have 7 kids. My oldest is 22. He's away at college, but for the most part, I got in-the-house people, right? I got a teenager eating all my food, and I got a 1-year-old that, I'm supposed to know the months, 16, 17. I'm a dad. I don't know that. Almost 2. But anyway, my homecoming, when the alarm at the door says front door and the kids come rush to me, that's an amazing feeling that I think. I think about when I'm driving on the Dan Ryan because I work downtown, and I hit that curve right after you pass Chinatown, you get ready to come around to Roosevelt, and I see the skyline. That's homecoming to me, man. Or in the summertime when the traffic is bad, so you're gonna jump on at Roosevelt and you smell the onions from Maxwell Street. Man, that's homecoming.
That's so Chicago.
That's what I think, man.
It's crazy you say that because now we're flying back and forth from LA filming our show, Backyard Bar Wars on True TV, and when we land, whether it's Midway or O'Hare, doesn't matter what you take, but when you come back from the airport and you see that skyline, and then I like hitting Lakeshore Drive.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? For me, it's nothing like seeing the lakefront and then you see the skyline and you like, man, we got the most beautiful skyline in the world. You know what I'm saying? I love being
I've been
from
to
Chicago.
a lot of cities in this country.
Yeah, no one can argue the fact that we have the most beautiful skyline. If they try to argue the fact, call your favorite neighborhood Chicago historian. I'll point out the buildings on their skyline that were designed by Chicago-based architecture. We'll take those points.
That's
too.
a flex. That's
We'll
a
take
flex.
those too.
It is.
All right, so as we wind down here, can you tell us about any special projects that you're working on that people need to be on the lookout for?
So what I firmly believe in as a Chicagoan is it ain't always about me. There's a program called My City, My Block, My Hood. So tap in with them. I have a company called Chicago Mahogany Tours. I do Southside tours. I'm tired every time you go on YouTube or anywhere else, you type in the Southside. It has something that's not necessarily the most positive, like, we created field houses as a thing here in Chicago. So any park you go to in the country, field houses come from here. The people who designed Washington Park and Jackson Park also designed front lawns for Americans as a thing. We did the recessing your house back comes from the same people that designed Washington Park and Jackson Park.
Right.
There's such a historical provenance that goes on.
Right.
That on King Drive, a black dude on both sides of the streets. His name was Herman Roberts. We don't ever really say his name, John Johnson and Ebony. So I just want to point out that stuff. A lot of those houses on King Drive, where they lived and their energy is still there. And I think if we start to point out what energy permeates the area, you can start to change the area. It's real hard to do the wrong thing when you know better. You got to be real purposeful to do that. And that's not everybody's design. Most people are moving in unawareness. And that's why history is so important, so that we can make our people aware.
Yeah. All right. Without history, you don't know who you are or where you're from. And in some ways, you don't know where you're going.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I wanted to close it there, but I'm not, because I want to ask you this too. When you think about the history of redlining and racial covenants, where do we go now? What is important now as far as home ownership?
Great question. Two things. Stop abandoning our spaces. I understand there are turbulent issues in African American communities on the South Side. Believe me, I understand. And I have children. When someone is hurt or shot 2 blocks away, my instinct is to pack and run to Naperville, where the occurrences of gun violence is less, right? But that won't fix the area. And so fix your credit. Make sure that your credit, be aware of home loans. We live in areas that are, if your grandma left you a bungalow, you can join the Chicago Bungalow Association. And if you make a minimum amount of money and you apply, they'll repair your roof. They'll come out and give you new windows. And home ownership is truly the way to change a neighborhood. When you're a renter and something happens, you just pack up and go. When you own the property, you pick up the trash outside. Aesthetics matter, and to the point, and then it rolls further than that. This is why I stay in Auburn Gresham. ComEd pays me pretty well. I can live in the suburbs. But I chose to live in Auburn Gresham because I want neighborhood kids to see an African American family that's a homeowner, walking his dog. That's how we promote change. And to what you said earlier, I have children. Student loans is a tricky thing nowadays. Sometimes it's very predatory. But if I'm paying my mortgage every time, and when I have some money, I pay extra towards it, toward the principal balance. When she's ready to go to college, I can take out that equity and pay for college. And so those things are important. Making sure that our kids don't step in the same potholes we step in. And to you guys' credit, one of those major potholes is home ownership. So I'm glad that you guys are partnered with guarantee rates and make sure that folks are able to get equitable loans no matter where they find themselves.
Man, that drums it up right there,
That drums
man.
it all up right there.
Yeah.
Thank you for that word. because it's definitely in alignment with what we believe. Where can they find you if they're looking for Dilla?
Hey, I'm
the Chicago
everywhere
story.
until they make me change my username, but I'm 6figure_Dilla, the number 6 FIGGA_Dilla, DILLA, all platforms, 6figure Dilla.
All right. Okay. Appreciate you coming out, brother. Yes. We will definitely be having you back.
Hey, that's my honor.
And we want you all to stick around for Anthony's After Set. Thank you for sticking around for Anthony's After Set. Well, at today's party, we talked about history. I mean, we had Dilla Thomas, the Chicago historian, putting a lot on our minds about what happened in the past. Legacy, history, what we've learned from it, what we observe, and what are we creating? Because history isn't something that is stagnant, it's something that is constantly in motion. I want you all to create your legacy. I want you to create history and know that everything you're doing now to create financial literacy in your family, for you, financial stability, home ownership, life insurance, all of these things that we do to build a legacy for our family. Know that you have to take action. And it's not about what if things didn't go right in your family tree. It's about what you're going to do now to create your own roots. History matters. Legacy matters. And at this after set, I want you to think about what you're going to do to create your own history. Thank you for checking in to Anthony's After Set.